about esoteric psychology. And a brief introduction: I have been a student of ancient teachings for a long time, and I learned how to meditate, a particular practice I've done since 1972. And along the way I've learned a lot of interesting stuff, and I try to share it with people here. And I don't have a big degree in my wall back here for esoteric psychology, but I believe if you listen and for a while, then you'll get something out of this. And I reference a lot of important books, and the previous books I've been referencing were The Light of the Soul and Treatise of Cosmic Fire and Esoteric Psychology. And this book here, The Rays and Initiations, the teachings that I came across, some of the masters, you might say, have one particular series of books, this one here. They talk about the various aspects of the human psyche, as I was speaking about in the last video, the emotional component and our mental component, our body. And then there's a lot of conversation in the teachings about various types of energy that come to us. For example, in this particular teaching, they talk about the 7 rays. The 7 rays, there are 7, you might say, bands, and within those, each band, as I was talking about in other videos, a spectrum. We have the harmonics and the ratios and so on. And the idea is that there's 5 different types of principles. There's actually 7, and they're called the rays, or the frequency bands, you might say. And their interplay of this energy affects everything in the cosmos. And there are definitions, and the first ray is the will, the second ray is love, the third ray is intelligence, and then there's a number of other different, I guess you'd call them operational energies that manage or run the cosmos. And here we download and we participate, because as long as we're in this body, we have water and all the different chemicals and elements and so on, and minerals. So we are basically just completely involved and immersed in this whole thing that's going around, in energy. So esoteric psychology talks a lot about the integration of all our energies and having the neutral point of consciousness that is just like the circle, the symbol for the sun with a circle and the point in the middle. The point represents a point is like a formless thing. It's just a point of consciousness we have, and the circle around it represents all around, a unity. So we have this little tiny thread of our consciousness that is neutral and goes through every different level. There's a consciousness embedded in the universe, in the cosmos, and we're just part of it. So esoteric psychology talks about harnessing our various components and unifying them and using them to operate, just as I said in the last video about, let's say you're the captain on a bridge of this big huge container ship, and you got a few buttons and a bunch of windows, and you got some operational things that you can do to manage this huge vehicle in this big ocean. Now, in a sense, we're on this sophisticated vehicle that we have, and we're managing it through this universe, the ocean, so to speak, and there are things that we can do to direct our own awareness and destiny and bring things to manifestation and create. And that's basically a function of a human being. We can create. We can do all kinds of amazing things. Now, the question is how to do that. Now, the Upanishads say, well, you have to have the concentration, because all greatness on earth comes from concentration. And what is that exactly? I'll give you an example here. Let's say you want to push something that is a little distant from you, but your hand won't reach it. Now, you can move something with a rope, but you have to pull it. But a stick is that you push the stick and it'll push whatever on the end of the stick. And the analogy I'm giving is that the pole, the stick, is one solid object, it's basically concentrated matter, and therefore when you push on that, it will have a direct impact on whatever the space is across, because it's a solid thing. Unlike a rope, will flex. You see, so the point I'm trying to make is that when we use a tool of our own mind and emotions, this basically vehicle, if it's concentrated, if it's focused, then the analogy is it's like a control, like on an airplane. You move this lever, this little lever on the throttle here, or you move this little lever for the flaps or something, and it goes through a cable, and because that cable is solid and linked up properly, then it will make an effect on the plane. Now, there are inner mechanisms of our own being that we can explore. Now, there are teachings like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali that give a lot more specific training, and then there's yogis that will give certain training on how to focus the energy. But, for example, the hearing, the sense of hearing and the sense of sight, and all those can be refined to some degree and make a more powerful impact. And, for example, if you have better hearing, you'll have better songs, you'll make better sounds in your chants and so on. So the training in our psyche as a human being is to amplify and focus those elements, those moving parts, you might say, those psychological aspects, our emotions and everything, and harmonize them and get them into a point of resonance. And that's another big factor, because if you want, when you're dealing with frequency, how do you have a frequency to have an effect on another frequency, you might say? So this is a problem in electronics, where you can have a pulse, you see, so there can be one frequency moving along at a steady state, and then you introduce a pulse and add that to the frequency, and you send a pulse through the, modulate that, then it'll send a pulse and its information. That's how electronics communication is done. It's basically, you'd have a wave that's static or something, and then you amplify it or you modify it and you interpret it. There's a way of transmitting information, you might say. The same way as transmitting energy. So a lot of these things, these kinds of deeper understandings, what's called esoteric magic, or making things come into manifestation, they're extremely subtle. And we often use these things intuitively in our daily life, because we don't, deep down we know. For example, if we concentrate a certain amount, we'll get some work done, for example. Or if we organize ourselves, we'll have more clarity. So and then there's emotional. People can affect each other emotionally in certain ways. So intuitively we sort of know how we can harness those elements of our being and make things happen and all that. But there are specific things that get into on a really subtle level that it's only through a deep meditation in a place where at some point our thoughts have an effect. Okay, now the great beings, you might say, the people who meditate and for a long, long time, I mean, some great sages we all honor, they often leave a tremendous pool of beautiful vibration and energy on a temple that they went to, for example. And after a period of time, all that chanting and all that energy and all that prayer and everything imposes, it's a way of externalizing and manifesting some of that internal divinity. And that's why we have temples, and the temple itself isn't necessarily holy. We make them holy, you might say, by the vibration that we bring there, and the different tonalities that we make and so on. Because again, sound is one of those things. The sound is like a vibration that you can impose on the vibration. Let's say, we fill up a room with music. Isn't that so nice when the room is just, there's empty, or maybe there's some noise, but then instead you turn on a beautiful, beautiful music, and that speakers, the technology, the sound vibrations, the waves or the pulses clarify a whole room. You can just make a whole beautiful room. That's why people use music, because they can make their whole atmosphere and even their body tingle with this joyful feeling. So esoteric psychology gets into some really deep things about how to manifest and how to, for example, cleanse your body. One of the immediate things that we can learn, because we have this intuitive connection with the vehicle that we're in and all the different systems it has, the practice of yoga and positions and so on, and meditation, and internalizing and feeling all the different parts of our body so that we can heal ourselves. We can heal ourselves to some degree, and at least do a lot of preventive maintenance on our being by harmonizing it through meditation. And again, the food products that we eat, sometimes they disturb things and they get things all chaotic, and our intestinal system goes out of whack and so on. But there's a certain amount of discipline and a certain amount of just habits that can enable us to take that deep level of consciousness and use all of them, including our body, because athletes are really good. They're people who can do all kinds of amazing things with their hands and eyes. But the more we practice and the more we go in and manifest and get synchronized with what's within, what's out, then if our intention is there, that's like that pulse. You see, that's where, when we have a desire that we want to accomplish something, or we want to bring something into manifestation, an intensity of desire, intensity of will, and there's many aspects of exercising a will. One kind of will is, like you take a hammer and you see that nail and you just give it a good whack, and that's an exercise of your will. I'm smacking that hammer, that nail down. But there's a deeper type of will that, when you, for example, you want to make a complicated product. Maybe you're making a piece of art, and then you have to have a certain intensity will that lasts a lot longer than a hammer pound. There's a certain mental alignment with a goal and a purpose that gathers all our being together. And anybody who accomplishes anything in life, if you want to build a business or build a home or do anything or produce art or create something, you're going to have to harmonize and activate your mind. When you, for example, designing a house, you start the drawing, the planning, all that integration is taking those systems, those little systems of controls, like that ship captain, say, okay, what does this lever do? Well, try it out. See, there's aspects of our own being that through meditation and through our own experimentation with our own awareness, we discover from within how to operate this vehicle. See, there's only a certain amount that someone can say from the outside. So, well, you do this or this, but there's, for example, when they train the captain of the ship, they okay, do this is the steering, this is the brakes, this is the throttle, all the different things, the rudders, the gauges, and so on. Okay, now you're kind of on your own there. See, basically, I can't be there every time when you're in a wave or something, but basically, you got the picture here. So, teachers teach us things. We learn. Anyone's a teacher if you can learn from somebody. So, how to get some intuition to find out how to manage our being. And for example, let's talk a little bit about the emotional component. For example, the emotions are very fluid, you might say, and that's an aspect of our psyche that is very volatile, as we know. And yet there are ways to sort of manage it from a higher neutral objective point of view, if we can get there. You see, instead of, let's say, for example, you're running a ship and you have a little problem on a ship or something and it gets a dent or something. Well, you go down and take a look at it and see what you can do, because just like there's aspects of our being that gets dented, and we go through relationships and problems and disappointments and deaths or health issues and so on, and we get kind of out of whack. But that higher level of consciousness that, okay, don't panic here, no judgment here, let's go take a look at this and see what we can do about it. And that's where the responsibility comes, because, you know, we can learn from so many teachers, but ultimately we have to get that contact with that internal teacher that kind of says, okay, I know the basics. That teacher can inspire me. Now I'm kind of on my own, and I'm going to pedal my bicycle, and I'm going to take it places that I want to go. All the teachings that have come down to us for thousands and thousands of years are just simply more and more about how to enhance your situation here, how to get more clear, how to get happier, how to be more productive, how to tap into your genius, and all those things, because this life is it. I mean, we have a lot of plans in our life, but essentially, when it really comes down to it on a day-to-day level, none of those plans will come to fruition if we don't know how to operate ourselves and run and have some clarity. And even a lot of our plans is probably a good thing they don't come to fruition. So a lot of times managing our being has to do with managing expectations and not having too many expectations, because just like I've talked about many times, is not having a reaction to what you perceive. So we do our best. For example, like in aviation, I take off and maybe I encounter some weather that I didn't plan on. Well, now I have to figure out what I'm going to do about that. I don't need to panic. I can turn around, or I can go down, or whatever. But there's an internal wisdom that we have that has a certain clarity that, you know, thinking doesn't necessarily solve a problem. I mean, there's a certain amount of overview, stream of thinking, stream of awareness, intuition that we need to tap into to get a good overview. Like I said, trying to manage the mind. How do you manage the mind if you can't manage the mind with the mind? It's like catching your elbow with your hand on the same arm. You have to observe the mind from that non-dual, independent, deep awareness that is just simply no judgment. It just observes, and that is the commander of that is who we really are. And our mind and our body should be all subservient to that, in the sense of that these are the instruments to which we use. But, you know, we're the captain of the ship, so to speak. So, esoteric psychology is a vast subject, and I talk a lot about it in other areas. It's all about perception, because if we're going to see clearly in our life, the first thing we have to do is, like just when you wash the windshield of your car or something, you wash the mirrors so you can see what you're doing. There's a certain amount of practice of just being still and doing nothing, letting our breath come to a pause. There's a natural breathing rate that we all have that is gentle. And when we get to that and just relax, it starts to slow down. And then if you notice, sometimes if you start thinking and worrying, your breath starts speeding up a little bit. If you deliberately pause from time to time, and then at different times pause for a long time, then the rest of your being gets to catch up. You see, it's kind of like the mind is like the dog, and the dog is running, and you're just getting dragged along with the dog. Don't let the mind do that to us, because this dog, their mind, we got the leash here. Just, okay, sit down, dog. Now, a happy dog sits down by itself. You see, the happy dog is okay. So if we keep our mind in good order and functioning and everything and satisfy our basic needs, then, you know, it won't be such an urgent thing. We can just manage ourselves. That's a part of managing rhythm, keeping rhythms. The science has a lot of rhythms and cycles. Our body is just a part of this existence. We, in our mind, if we just think about our mind and our ideas and I'm doing this and that, we're not taking into account the rest of our being, that the inner part of our being, the inner sensitivities. And so one part of our body, like our desires of our body, for example, like if you stay up really, really late, the desire, I want to have some more, cake or whatever, it's a big celebration, you're having a big party and you stay up late, or maybe you're in some project, your adrenaline's running. At some point, like your mind is running, but your body's saying, I can't do that anymore. So integration, harmonizing, so that all of the elements of our being are operating in sync. So I don't like to make these videos too long. I would like to get comments and the feedback. Again, I'm not a degreed psychologist. I have an inner experience. I practiced meditation since 1972, and I've been very interested in esoteric teachings of all kinds, symbolism and meditation and so on. So I listen to a lot of scientific information as well, and I like to play guitars as a hobby, but there's all kinds of possibilities in every human life, and that's my main point, that no matter who you are, it doesn't, all the color and size and everything is irrelevant when it really comes down to, we all have that inner consciousness. We all have that one thread of consciousness that goes all the way from the physical. Close your eyes. It'll keep going. I mean, there's no end to the subtlety in which a human being, we have this pineal gland, we have endocrine, we have a system here. That's what the yogis say. That's what we know. That when harmonized and operating in a real efficient manner, it brings a whole lot of joy and general harmony to your life, including on the physical level. So I'm going to talk a little more about this in other videos and aspects about essentially the science of knowing yourself as magic, and basically all taking something from the unmanifest to the manifest. That's basically, we're all magicians here. That's what we're doing. Isn't it magical to use your fingers and hands and eyes? You can do all that stuff. You can make a pottery, or you can make art, or you can type, or you can do all kinds of stuff. But this being that we have, we take it for granted, but it's a lot more than we take it for granted. So that's my main point. Just, we have a lot of potential here, every single one of us, and I try to give some information and some commentary that might be of use to somebody, and I appreciate all the feedback. So thanks again for listening.